So good evening. My name is Holly Schaitberger. As Renee said, I am David Youngsmith's understudy for the evening, so glad to be with you all. All right, so her list of accomplishments is long and impressive. 1974 graduate of UC Berkeley, 1977 graduate of Hastings College of Law, fellow of this Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers and also the International Academy of Family Lawyers, certified family law specialist, annually named as super lawyer for Northern California in the family law, lead counsel on numerous published appellate court decisions, including Marriage of Preem, Marriage of DeGuigne, and Guardianship of Olivia J., as well as lead counsel in published California Supreme Court cases, KM versus EG and Estate of McDonald. She's the author of numerous publications and articles, national and international speaker on matters pertaining to family law, and if that's not enough, she is also a qualified Pilates mat teacher. She is Jill Hersh.
I'm so impressed with myself. Okay.
All right, so we're going to go back in time, and I want to start by asking you about the intersection for you between your undergraduate studies at Cal and law school. And as I understand it, there was a potential fork in the road for you, and that perhaps you had another line of studies that you had contemplated pursuing. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, I was simultaneously admitted to 2 different kinds of graduate school. I was admitted to rabbinical school, and I was admitted to law school. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the time that you applied for rabbinical studies, were there many women that
I would have been the 14th ordained woman rabbi,
Okay.
which is a weird fact to know about yourself, really.
All right, so you attended law school at Berkeley, but I understand that at Hastings, pardon.
Yes, but it's not called Hastings anymore.
Right, it's called
UC Law School San Francisco or something like that. Yeah.
And I understand that before you graduated, you in fact made your first court appearance.
I did.
What can you tell us about that?
I did. I made my first court appearance in 1976 as a law student. As a supervised law student, I was working in the stories of my life before I actually became licensed or something. But anyway, I was appearing in front of Judge Rothenberg in Alameda County. It was Law in Motion. And I don't know how many people in here ever did PI work, but the people who did PI work will recognize what the term a dog case means. This, however, was literally a dog case because it was Kewen versus the city and county of Alameda. People did not like how their dog was treated at the pound. And the room was really crowded, and it was a demur to the complaint. And Rothenberg was really pissed off. And he said, Kewen versus the county of Alameda, I don't know what you're doing in my courtroom. And all I heard after that was and I was never able to decode anything he said. And he asked me a question. I didn't know what it was because I couldn't understand what he was saying. I mean, I literally could not understand what he was saying. And I remember the supervising lawyer stood up and said, this is her first court appearance. She's a certified law student. And I remember Rothenberg saying, and I'm sure we'll all agree she'll make a very fine lawyer someday. And I went into that circular parking lot over in Oakland and stood in the middle of the parking lot and sobbed. That was my first court appearance. I didn't appear again until I was licensed.
Okay, so that didn't dissuade you from completing law school?
No.
Okay, so tell us
No.
about the start. When you leave law school, tell us about the start of your legal career. How did your legal career commence?
My legal career commenced in a general practice at that time with my father and my sister. And I did my first divorce trial in 1978, during which there was an earthquake right after. I don't know how many people here remember, I think his name was Edgar Holton. He was a forensic accountant, and he had just been impeached, and there was an earthquake. And I remember the judge rushed off the bench and wrapped his arms and legs around the entrance to his chambers. And it was in the old courthouse. It was in the old City Hall courthouse in San Francisco. But it was a general practice, And then I found that I was gravitating towards family law. And so I registered on the referral list that Madeline was talking about. And I remember getting a call and the receptionist yelling down the hall, "Jill, somebody is calling and they're actually calling for you." And that was my first client, $30 or $40 an hour. My first two clients were house pension and spousal abuse. So there was a lot to learn.
A lot to
It was
learn.
a good start to learn.
A lot to
Yeah.
learn. Well, and we all know that many experts in their craft at some point have some highly influential person or mentor with whom they have a very influential collaboration. Was there someone like that for you? And if so, who was it?
Well, I was able to observe really outstanding lawyers and how hard they worked. In that sense, I was able to witness staying up all night and writing a closing argument, that there was no night and there was no day. You simply worked as many hours as you had to work until you were done working. Probably the person, however, who gave me the, some of you are going to think this is because of the opinions in his rulings, and that's not the reason. Probably the person who gave me the most encouragement and nurtured my practice most directly was Justice King. Was actually Justice King. I remember his saying to me, "You know, Jill, I don't know why you're not in the AML. All the good people are in there." And so there was these little nudges. Or he'd call me on the phone and he'd say, "You need to interrupt less." Or "Be nicer to him, he's a good guy." Or any number of things. But mostly it was watching his demeanor. And it was watching the way he treated people with respect. And it was the incredible judicial temperament that he brought to the work that he brought. And it was a fantastic model, really, for how to behave. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he advanced the practice of family law monumentally from where it had been, because when I started practicing, we were just coming out of fault. And we were suddenly in a different culture in terms of how to think about what we were doing. He was the first trial court judge I appeared in front of in family law. He had an unlimited calendar. He had an enormous courtroom, so big that when one of my clients came absolutely hammered out of his mind, I could hide him in the corner. But he just treated everybody with respect. And he and Gene Ames, who was mentioned earlier, started the program of mediation of custody cases across the hall from his courtroom.
And I would imagine that having started that mentor-type relationship with him as a younger lawyer, that relationship would have changed over time as you became a more experienced and sophisticated attorney yourself. How would you describe that?
He wasn't mentoring me when I was a younger lawyer because he was on the bench.
Oh, you were learning from.
And I was just trying to learn how to be a lawyer.
Right.
Well, I still have a relationship with him.
Right, to this day.
So I learned a lot from observing him, and as I matured in the practice changed tremendously. It used to be that a big case, the older people here, and by the way, I want to say it's really hard for me to understand how I'm here and Bill Whiting's bar card starts with a 3, but I guess if you have a 5-digit bar card, you're all in the same group. It used to be the practice was very different. A big case was a professional practice and a house. You know, a doctor or a lawyer and having to do the intangible value and goodwill, those were considered really good cases when we started practicing. I'm not saying they're not good cases now, but there's been an industrial revolution and a financial revolution in our immediate area, and it has tremendously changed the practice. And the other thing I want to say also is when I started practicing, and I recognize this with Madeline, there were no law clerks. There was nobody. We did every single thing from the bottom up, which I happen to think is a really great way to learn how to do what you're doing. And in those days, we didn't have Dissomaster. We had a grid, and you would like bring your finger down one side and across the other, and a number would wherever it intersected, that gave you an idea about the support. And spousal support was pretty much 40 to 45% from 50% of the other person's earnings, if I remember correctly. I saw Ron recognizing what I was talking about. It was just really, really different.
So at the outset, I outlined some of the appellate cases that you've
Yes.
worked on, but I would like to focus on one in particular. In March 2001, you caused me to file a petition on behalf of a client that would culminate in the California Supreme Court opinion of KM versus EG in 2005.
I'm looking at my worthy opponent.
And,
Yes.
and you were lead counsel at trial and also
Yes.
at the Court of Appeal and the California Supreme Court. And I would like to ask you what drew you to that case and what the import is of that case to you today.
So in that case, two twin children, young children were, I'm going to give it from my point of view, Diana, were taken by their other mother away from my client who was also their mother at a time before we had equalized the treatment of, in England they call it modern family, before we had recognized modern families here. And I think all civil rights work starts with a personal problem. And she brought in a very personal problem. And it was the hardest case I ever tried, because I had to try the case to where I thought the law should go, but not necessarily where it was at that point. And I thanked the judge. I knew he was going to rule against me at the trial level, but he let me make my record. That was the most important thing to me. Was very hard. It was a 10-day trial, I think, about. And it ended up being, for me, the confluence of, well, first of all, appellate work is my favorite thing in the world. So there was that. But it ended up being the confluence of restoring these children to their mother, advancing the law on behalf of same-sex parents, and then from a spiritual point of view, also, there's a Jewish tradition called Tikkun Olam, which is to repair the world. And I thought, oh my God, I got an opportunity to do that. And so that case has meant a lot to me. I have loved all the cases that I've gone up on, but that one has special meaning. Mm-hmm. And I have somewhat followed the lives of the family since then. Mm-hmm. So it's been a moving experience. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know you've touched on this some. As I understand it, when you first began practicing family law, the state had shifted recently from a fault to a no-fault system. Women were just being recognized as having joint management and control of assets, and just wondering what, in your view, are some of the other most significant changes that you've seen to the practice of family law since your early career?
Well, the women lawyers aren't wearing hats anymore. So there's that. I used to go to court and there'd be Lucille Athorn. She'd have on a hat. A lot of these lawyers wore hats. Women wore hats. There is, it's just become, first of all, it's become more sophisticated. It's become more respected. I think one of the problems in family law has traditionally been that a lot of lawyers have thought, ugh, you get so involved in people's lives. Whereas to me, the benefit of family law is I get to be involved in people's lives, but I also get to do really interesting business work, interesting psychological work. It's a confluence of so many things all in one place, which is why I think there aren't thousands of fantastic family law lawyers, because of the kinds of interdisciplinary skills that you have to bring to the job. I just think that it has become more complex, more interesting, more recognized. The psychological components become more recognized. The financial issues have become more interesting. The law is way more developed now than it was. The cadre of professionals that you use and the industries that you end up learning about have become more diverse and more complicated. And now people have other lawyers preparing their income and expense declarations, and that's a big plus for me. But I just think it's burgeoned into something that doesn't look a lot like the way it used to. However, what I do want to say, in the area of domestic violence, it's become more sophisticated. We finally adopted the English model of coercion and intimidation, and I think that the problem there, however, is the same as it always was. It's a question of the triers of law and fact understanding it better than they used to.
All right, unfortunately, it's time for us to move on to the rapid fire.
God.
Now, I've done a modified rapid fire. So these questions may be, some are the same, but some will be a bit different than the ones we've heard.
Okay.
But we will start with, what noise or sound do you love?
I love the sound of my children talking to each other and my granddaughter trying to talk and early music. And my Pilates teacher.
Okay, what profession other than your own would you attempt?
Well, now I can't think of one I'd rather be doing.
How does your professional life intersect most with your personal life? You know this one.
I know this one. I know the answer to this. Oh, I give great eulogies. I give great eulogies. That is a really weird answer. I realize that's a really weird answer. So my husband is, now he's Jew by choice, but he comes from a big Irish Catholic family. I have become the family eulogist for this large family, and I have given other eulogies, especially for one of our colleagues who died way too early, years ago. So oddly, my propensity for public speaking has morphed into somebody who gives eulogies. I just gave one 2 weeks ago, so that's why it's fresh in my mind.
All right. All right, I have one final question.
Okay, uh-oh.
Who is your favorite Beatle?
Well, it's John Lennon. May he rest in peace. We used to have, the mothers in my son's class used to have what's called the John Lennon exception, which was, somebody knows what this is, which was, if there is one person that you could, okay, you talked about pot. I'm going to talk about sex.